All right, it's exactly 4 o'clock, at least in middle Europe, in Germany, right? So I say good morning to everyone in the US, good afternoon to everyone in Asia, or good evening, even depending where you are, and have a nice afternoon here in Europe. Today, we're going to take a look at conducting interview analysis with MAXQDA. How does this software help us when we do an interview study? And even if you're not doing or not exclusively doing an interview analysis, a lot of what we do here transfers to other types of data as well. For example, prime example, focus group analysis. If you have group discussions, most of the steps here are going to apply in a very similar way. All right. For the beginners, a quick recap. What does MaxQDA do? You probably, if you know one thing about MaxQDA, then you very likely know that MaxQDA is used for coding. It is in its essence a coding software. That means coding in the sense of coding in qualitative research. This is this process of assigning categories, codes, tags, labels, keywords, some short combination of words to specific parts of usually text, and then you can analyze and retrieve data. So here, for example, we have coded this data here saying this section is about more free time, and here it is about flexibility of the job, for example. On this coding, labeling, assigning of keywords, on this simple function, a lot of things build upon. A lot of your analysis functions, retrieval functions, data comparison, tables, visual tools, almost all of that builds on coding. So we will deal a bit with coding today, but it will not be our primary focus, because if you know one thing about MaxQDA, it's probably coding, and the other steps around that are probably newer to you. As you might know, and this becomes already important for our when tackling interviews, MaxQDA can be used for text analysis, of course. A lot of scholarly research is still focused on analyzing various kinds of texts. But MaxQDA can also be used for analyzing image, audio, and video data. And now, if you think of it, what's an interview? Is an interview text, audio, video, image? Probably not. So that already shows us we're never like really doing interview analysis, but we usually analyze a sort of record of this interview. It can be a written transcript. So we turn the interview into text. That's, I would say, the most common way how to analyze interviews nowadays. You can also, if you want to be more abstract, you can analyze a protocol that was written about the contents of the interview, where maybe the interviewer took notes and then at the end they agreed, hey, this is the protocol of what has been said during the interview. You can also analyze an interview as an audio file. You can listen to the audio and then analyze the audio track. And you could even keep the video and analyze, well, what are the facial expressions of this person, right? So you see, you have a lot of options. The most common thing is transcription, and this is the path we will go down. But I will say a little bit about this multimedia part of it as well. Because, for example, if you would be very interested in the emotional responses of the participants, how they react to a certain question, what faces, what mimic they are using, a video might still be relevant. Like, for example, one of my clients is working with therapy sessions. Well, there the visual element is very important, because if you reduce a therapy session only to the words that have been spoken, you probably miss a lot. If it's just a professional interview with an expert giving you information about something, probably the visual layer will not be that critical. But if we break down the usual steps that we do in interview analysis, I would come up with these 4 steps. First, we need to record the interview. We need to capture it somehow. We then need to transcribe it. We need to turn it into text, because most analysis is done via text. And then we will code the transcript and in the end, analyze the results. So recording the transcript, so audio or video recording, is actually the one thing that MaxQDA cannot do at the moment. So there is no record function in MaxQDA, because let's be honest, you're not going to put up your laptop and connected to a software. If you do this in person, typical thing, you have either a specific dictation device or you just record it on your smartphone and you put it in the center of the table. Or if you have a Zoom call, for example, or a Teams call or some kind of call, you often get the recording from the call, usually also with the video feed. In both cases, you don't need a specialized recording tool, right? So recording is the first section we're not going to look into right now because this is usually quite intuitive. You record it either an audio recording during your personal meeting, or you record like this a video feed of, for example, a discussion. Transcription, however, is much more interesting because transcription means we turn the audio file into text, because in the end, we will work a lot with text. Text is much easier to analyze than an audio file. And text is also easier if you want to quote your data, if you want to look at examples from your data. Telling someone, please listen to these 15 seconds is not very convenient, but saying, hey, here are 5 lines of text, please read them. What do you think about this interesting quote from my interviews? Transcripts are just very convenient way of working. And there are 2 basic ways how you can get your transcripts. The one is the more old-fashioned way, in the sense of you sit down, you listen, and then you type. You're basically your own secretary. You type what you hear in the transcript. The other option is you use automated voice recognition, like using an AI to automatically transcribe your data. Both options, in my opinion, are still valid options, although one of them takes much more time than the other one. But we will go down in a moment the automatic text recognition part, but just want to say a few words about when does it make sense to do it manually. Manually makes sense if the data is very strongly not standardized, if it's like a very special dialect that makes it very difficult, or even more so than dialects, if you are interested in very fine nuance of language, like intonation, if someone says something very strongly or weakly, or how people take turns, how strongly the language overlaps if they interrupt each other in conversational analysis, for example. If you really take a look at the dynamics of the conversation, you often need a more detailed transcript than what automatic text recognition can supply for you, because the automatic text recognition is focused at giving you this verbal contents, what was said. It's telling you very little about how something was said. But we will see in a moment how this works in MAXQDA and how also MAXQDA can help you to sort of supplement this sort of loss of detail from a transcript. Okay, we will go now to using AI to automatically transcribe our data, because this is something that MAXQDA can help us with. Just in case, if you have some other text recognition, speech to text tool, you can use that as well and then just get your transcript in. If you say, hey, I don't know, I get this automatic transcript from, I don't know, something somewhere, you can also just use that. So we will assume here we don't have that and we want to get it from MAXQDA. So automatic transcription means we need to select the file that we wish to upload and transcribe, and then we choose the language, provide our vocabulary, and then we hit transcribe and wait. I will show you how this is done. So this, too much stuff in my background here. All right. So I will start MAXQDA now, because we will begin at 0. We will begin together, assuming we just recorded an interview, right? And now we want to go into analyzing. So I will click here on new and create a new MAXQDA project. If you have never used MAXQDA before, if you don't have an existing project, this is a step that you usually take. Creating this project just means you have basically one container where all your data is going into. So I will say here, this is here, let's say my master thesis with interviews. Usually you have one project per research project. Usually my bachelor, my master, my dissertation, something like that. All right, I create this. Just that you see, this is now a file. Here, my master thesis, QDA. This is where the data is stored. It's on my device. So, and now I want to import data. Now we already have several options. Right now I have an audio recording of the interview. So I don't have a transcript yet. If you have a transcript yet, you can import the transcript already, link it to your audio file. We just have an audio file for now. So I say I want to import an audio document, an audio file, and it's somewhere here. Interview with Matteo. This is a short interview. It's just 7 minutes long, just to can demonstrate things with it pretty quickly. I say open. And now MAXQDA asks me already, hey, would you like to automatically transcribe this file? You can say, no, I just want to import it. You can say, I already have a transcript and I want to link it. Or you can say, yes, please transcribe this for me. I'm now going to take the yes, please transcribe for me action. But if you have a transcript already, you could also link it simply, and that's it. We'll have a look at what linking then happens, what happens when we link things. All right, now I'm ending up in this automatic transcription settings here. Automatic transcription text, speech to text is unfortunately not for free, but it is quite affordable. You have to buy time here. So for example, if you like sign up if you create a MAXQDA account, if you use it for the first time, you have 1 hour for free. So feel free to use this 1 hour to see if the quality works in your language, if that fits well for you. And then you can decide if you want to buy more time for transcription, but it's the standard rates that you find. So one thing that's important here is I need to here choose the language that is spoken in the interview. You see there is a wide range of languages from Arabic to Welsh. So from A to W. One thing that's important is that almost all of these languages mean that it's going to be the entire interview will be in one language. There is only one exception here. There's a mix of English and Spanish because that's quite common. There's a special setting for this. In our case, we will say this is an English interview. If it's UK or US, I don't think it matters too much here. I mean, it's German, English, so I guess it's UK because that's what we guys learn over here. So you choose the language here so that the transcription service knows what is this supposed to be, right? If you switch languages a lot, this can be a bit confusing. So what we can do here, and this is a very interesting choice that you have not with all transcription tools, is that you can add your own vocabulary. This is particularly useful if you have your like unique names of people or institutions that are not very common standard words. For example, MAXQDA software. If this is a word that comes up in your interview, maybe you want to add it here because funnily enough, MAXQDA doesn't know MAXQDA in the transcription sense. So you could enter here, for example, like I could here say work-life balance. This is a specific term that comes up. This one it will likely know, but I could also say something like MAXQDA, or I could say UN, or I could say, I don't know, Barack Obama, something like this. If you say, okay, there are some special words in there, especially names are very interesting. Names and acronyms you can add here. I'm going to get rid of this right now because it's not too exciting. In this interview, there should not be nothing too difficult. But company names, people names, institution names, you edit here. I now hit transcribe and we let it run a little bit. So the file is now uploaded so that it can be text-to-speech recognized. Now it says the transcription has successfully started. We see down here transcribing is running. So this transcription needs a connection, an online and internet connection, so that the transcription can be processed. One thing that's good to know, because this is AI, this is getting uploaded. Where is my data? One thing that's good to know is that MAXQDA, the software, is made by a company based in Berlin. So it's German software. And that means it follows European data protection standards and data protection rules. It's fully GDPR compliant. You can look up on the documentation in detail. But this means if you do a research project, for example, in Europe, and you want to make sure you comply with these regulations, MAXQDA is a very easy choice because the company is based in Europe, and they would get into serious troubles if they would not keep to European data protection standards. And also this means that the data is processed by servers in the EU. It's not stored, it's not used for training purposes, and so on and so on. So you can be quite safe with this kind of software. Yeah, so we will now, in a moment, the transcript will come up. Usually the transcript takes about a third of the time of the original interview to be processed. We here have a 7-minute interview. That means I need to maybe fill up 2 to 3 minutes, but we'll see if it comes up in a second. We can immediately work with that. There is, of course, always the question if you need a transcript or if you just want to work with the audio. We will explore this also a little bit because, as I already mentioned in the beginning, an interview is, at least in its recorded form, usually an audio or even video file, but we turn it into text. MAXQDA still offers us the option to analyze the original audio file and listen into the audio. We'll have a look at the moment. So here it says done. Here is my interview. I double click on it, and here you now see this is the transcript. Thank you for participating in our interview, in our study. We are interested in this and that. It's a short interview, short because then we don't have to wait too long together. And you can see how this process actually works. One thing that you already notice here is that it's not only recognizing text, but it's also recognizing voices. So it keeps the speakers part. You see here, it said here, speaker 1, speaker 2, speaker 1, speaker 2, speaker 1, speaker 2. This most transcription services do, but if you just have a dictation function, for example, on your phone, it will not distinguish different voices. So it's for a good reason that you want to use a specialized tool here. So let's have a look at this. So we can, here we see, and this is now MAXQDA. Here in the top left, we see the currently open document. This little play button next to it means that there's actually an audio file connected to it. I will quickly see if I can share. Yeah, I can share my computer sound as well. Stereo. Okay, I will show you now. Don't be scared. I'm going to turn on some sound. I can click here on the play button, and then I can listen into the interview.
Thank you for participating in our interview. In our study, we are particularly interested in your work-life balance.
So this is here the transcript we have.
Balance and well.
We can listen to it. We can also use these clock icons to navigate between the transcript and the original text. So the good thing here is your audio stays very close, and you can always listen into it if there's something odd, if there's something strange. You can just check and listen to the original file again. All right, that's the transcription. You see, this was quite fast. 7 minutes of text. If I would need to type that, it would maybe take me 20 minutes, half an hour at the very least. And this is always the question. If you want to type and transcribe manually, you're going to lose a lot of time that you could instead use for analysis. So in my opinion, you need to spend a bit of time correcting things and formatting things after it's transcribed. But it's usually worth the little bit of extra checking up on the transcript versus you have to spend all the time typing this out manually. Okay, we got the transcript. Now let's move on to our next step. So here we have the data types. I said a little bit about that as well. Yeah, we will now start color coding and refining the transcript a little bit. This is not a must step, but it's a step that I usually do. I read a bit into the interview, check on it, see how is it going, highlight elements that are interesting, write a memo, and if I pick up on any mistakes, I can fix these mistakes. So we'll just try that real quick. So here we go. So I can go into the document and see, okay, typical. So these documents here about the typical workday, about work-life balance. I have an afternoon class. Okay. So here, maybe I say, okay, this here is interesting. This person is living with a partner. They spend time together. Or I maybe want to highlight this here in yellow. You can use these highlights here to highlight relevant segments. This is what I usually do. Here, for example, we have a tiny problem. It's better we check this. We can then still go into the interview and check up on where was this and what has gone wrong here. You can turn on the edit mode here. This means you can then edit and change it here. For example, I might have noticed that this here is incorrect. It's just nothing was said. I can then just go here and delete this section. For example, I can clean this up. Or if you have a word that's somehow wrong, maybe it was not closest, but closed, you could just fix this. This is very convenient. You can have to turn on or turn off this editing function. But this means that while you are in your document, you're working on it, you're coding on it, you are highlighting it, you can always still fix things up. I show you one little trick. You have here the S1 and S2. Maybe you want to give them unique names. Then you can go here to edit, search for something here like S1, and then you can say here on this button with the uh, arrow, find and replace. And you can then say this should be here interviewer instead. So this is what I usually do at the beginning. I give these people a name to make it a bit clearer. S1 is the interviewer. And then I say replace. It's basically like a word, search and replace. And then we could say S2 here maybe is Matteo. You can do this, but if you turn on the edit mode and then hit search and then here replace. This is also something I do. And then I usually check. Sometimes it happens, for example, that a third speaker pops up. Although there are just two people, then there was maybe someone interrupted the interview or someone somehow changed their voice a bit. Then you can check, oh, what's going on here? You can change this manually. But usually it's just a tiny bit of fixing up. And you can do this while you go through your data, highlight interesting segments. And one thing that I always do when I've highlighted and read a document, maybe here, yellow again, then with green. So this is just that you find these segments quickly again. Then once I'm done with this interview, I always take the time to write a short memo. So I can right click here on a document and say I want to write a memo and then take some notes here on what this was. Usually I do something like biographical. Matteo is an English teacher. He teaches classes and individual students, something like that, and then maybe important topics. You see, you can format this here. It's usually really, really worth your time, taking some time to take some notes, not only to summarize the interview, but also for you to go through it again, reconsider what was important, what were things I found. Here, important topics might be, I don't know, flexibility of the workday, difference between early morning and afternoon classes, maybe such kind of topics might come up. If you have AI Assist, the AI add-on of MAXQDA, you can also create a summary with AI here that can also be an interesting basis to explore the document further. Just as an example here, we will not go deeper into that, but here you then get a quick summary on what this document is all about. All right, that's the data exploration and fixing part. I would really recommend if you go through your document to make changes, to verify your transcript, do this already in MAXQDA, then just fix up issues with the edit mode, but already keep taking notes, keep highlighting things that are interesting so that you don't lose these very early insights. Often the early insights in your research are even at least as interesting as late insights, because there you are still unfamiliar with the data, and later on you will know so many things about the data already that everything seems obvious for you. All right, that's transcription and exploration. We'll now go on to coding, proper coding. So coding is this process where we assign these labels, codes to the material. There are, of course, countless ways on how you could code. You can code deductively or inductively. That means concept-driven, research question-driven, or more inductively text-driven. So there are various ways if you do grounded theory or thematic analysis or the Joya method or whatnot. How you code, there are countless different ways that have the ups and downs. I will now show you one way. This is not the way, but it's a quite common way, a very inductive, data-driven, open-minded coding strategy, where we will code with a new code to create codes based on our data that we find. Then we will group them, and then we will write a memo for one code. This is very similar to what you find in lots of grounded theory codings. So what can I do here? I can go through my documents, and then I see, all right, I'll begin reading here. I can zoom in a little bit on this, easier for you to see. All right, a typical workday in my life. Most days I'm a self-employed teacher. So most days I wake up relatively early. So first thing, maybe I want to highlight this here in red and ask myself, what is a self-employed teacher? This is what I always wonder when Matteo is talking. That this would be early stage. Now let's say I want to move on and code here. What does this person do? They say here I have an early class, typically around 7 or 8 a.m. That's usually an hour or two. So I highlight this, and then I want to create a code for this sentence. Here I have an early class. I right click, and then I say code with a new code. You can also click over here. I'm more of a right click version. That means I will now create a code, a label that describes this text segment. So here I'll say, this is here maybe teaching an early morning class, or just early morning class. I like a more action-focused coding approach. Teaching an early morning class works well for me. I assigned this here, move it around a little bit, that you see it better. So the code teaching an early morning class was created and assigned over here. An hour and a half, okay. I can adjust the range here a little bit because that's maybe still part of it. And then after that, perhaps I have another English student, right? That's only Tuesdays. So I assign a code to this again. And maybe I call this individual teaching of students, because it sounds here like Matteo has an individual student, right? We can choose a different color here if we like. Then I can hit OK. And if I want to use these codes again, of course, I can do so. I can say, hey, here, maybe this is again about, maybe again about teaching an early morning class. So I can assign this segment to an already existing code. Then maybe one more here. I assign here, maybe teaching afternoon class, for example. I'll do a tiny bit more coding to demonstrate to you how this process works. Here, then the interviewer says, thank you. How flexible is your schedule? Maybe I say this here is about the flexibility of the working schedule. Then here, let's see what we have next. You told me you are free in the middle of the day, evenings. Yeah, if you have any questions, please write them in the chat. So then I can see them and pick them up immediately, or I can address them in the end. Yeah, good question. You see, if I see them over there, I can immediately answer them. I'll come to it in just a second. Then, so here, maybe let's see here one more. code with a new code, satisfaction with the job. And then let's see one more, and then I'll show you something else, and then I'm also gonna answer Selena's question in the chat. Let me see, pretty satisfied. Okay, let's just say maybe here it's something about job amount of vacations. Yeah, how much vacation do you get? Something like that. Isn't the best example. Okay. Selena already asks here about child and parent code, and that's exactly what I'm coming to next. And then I can also answer the specific questions, because what happens if you code in with this very open coding, initial coding strategy is that even if you reuse like certain codes, your list will get longer and longer. So you want to organize your codes sort of in a hierarchy to some degree. This is what you usually do when you code with MAXQDA. You begin building hierarchies between so-called parent codes, so the higher levels in the hierarchy, and child codes or subcodes that are below that. So if I now take a look here at teaching afternoon class, individual teaching, teaching an early morning class, I can ask myself, how can I group these codes? How could I build parent codes that fit this? So I deliberately set this up here so that there are two types of codes. I have here teaching, afternoon class, individual teaching, teaching an early morning class. I could say this here is describing a typical day, right? A typical work day. So I create a new code here by clicking on the plus. I call this typical, or maybe even that work day tasks, because these codes are tasks that make up your workday. Okay, so we hit OK here, workday tasks, and then I can drag and drop. So I created this workday tasks here with the plus. If we see here a 0, this is a code that's not yet applied anywhere to the data. And actually, I don't even want to apply it. I just want to use it as a label, as a parent code, as Selena calls it here in the chat. So I can say, you know what? Teaching an early morning class, this is part of my workday tasks. What do I do during a workday? I teach early morning class, I do individual teaching of students, and I teach afternoon classes. So this is how you drag and drop a code onto another code to make it a subcode or a sub element, a sub instance of it. And I'm going to create a second code. This one I'm going to call characteristics of the job. So what attributes does the job have? Is it satisfying? Is it unsatisfying? Do you have a lot of vacation, very little vacation? Is it flexible or not? High paid, well paid, lowly paid, prestigious or not? That are the things that I want to capture with my other code. And here I say how much vacation you have. This is maybe a characteristic of your job. I'm going to move this over here. Satisfaction to flexibility as well. And I can change the colors here with right click if I like. And this way you can build your code system. So about these hierarchies, now I come to the question. You can expand and collapse the code. So you see here next to workday tasks, there's a 0. Next to the title, there is a 0. That's how it's supposed to be. That's in most cases how you want to code, because all your codes are neatly sorted into the subcodes of this one. You see here, I have one afternoon class, one individual teaching, 2 times early morning class. I can collapse this here and then it's summed up to 4. Or I can expand it, then it says 0 here again. Likewise here with the characteristics of the job, I see there are 2 statements about the amount of vacations and so on and so on. Now Selena is asking, how can I move one child code into another code? So how would you get it there? You can just drag and drop a code. You can grab a code and then move it over here so that it becomes the subcode of another one. This is how you can change the hierarchy of codes. So I can say, oh, this one here is supposed to belong over here. I can even drag it up here and then it's outside. Of course, it can also happen differently if you, for example, happen to assign a statement to the wrong code, right? You assign this to satisfaction, and then much later you are like, oh, I want to move this somewhere else. You have several options. You can delete this here and then replace it with something else. Let's say I delete this code here and then instead assign this code. Oops, sorry. Instead assign this code. Or one thing, how you can also do it, maybe that's the part that helps Selena, is if you want to take a look at the segments here, the two, you can also double click here. Then you get a table where you can take a look at the two segments that you have here. And if you see, this one is wrong here, you can just move it into the correct code. So this is very flexible on how you can move your codes about. So you always have to distinguish between codes that are the labels and coded segments that are the actual sentences. So if your code is in the wrong, your subcode is in the wrong group, you can just move it by dragging it on the other one. Or if you want to move an individual statement, you can click here and then just move it to another one way or the other. Yeah, you're welcome. The question fitted in perfectly. All right, that's coding. There's much more to be said about coding. There are different strategies. In the code table, can you, we can pick up this question. In the code table, can you add comments directly? Yes, you can. So I can go here to the satisfaction codes. I can take a look here. And if I want, I can write some comments here if I want to. Can also be very convenient, helping you to summarize what it says here. Yeah, this table here is called the overview of coded segments. I find it often quite useful to quickly take a look. Yeah. Another question here about coding. Can you please explain in more detail a bit more how to group codes into meaningful themes or how different codes can be connected? Yes, this very strongly depends on your method that you choose. One thing that we see throughout most methods is that the further down in the hierarchy a code is, so here, if it's on this level, or even if you would go a level deeper, I'll just say here, for example, unflexible working day, right? And then we have here, highly flexible working day. Usually, the further you go down in your hierarchy, the closer you get to the original wording of the data, and it becomes very, very specific. Often the codes are in long, 2, 3, 4, even 5 words. If you go up that hierarchy, it should usually get more abstract, and the words will get shorter here. I could even call this here job characteristics. And I hope you see here why job characteristics is very different from highly flexible working day, because this here is very specific and this here is very general. And this approach between using very specific subcodes and using more abstract dimensions is a very common thing you see in most code systems. And then you have these approaches where you either begin on a very specific level, you code something and then you group it, or you begin on a very abstract level and then work out the details within your code. These are two very different coding strategies. Coming up with good themes, with good codes is quite a challenge. Last piece of advice I can drop here is if you develop codes, it does not mean that you have to use all the codes at the end of your research. Coding is also quite a bit about letting codes go. So if you develop a code or if you create a code and then you notice it doesn't fit, you can say, okay, you know what, I leave this one behind, I put it under other codes, but it's not relevant enough to work with this one further. Also, the key question is that these codes stay relevant for your research question. These codes need to reflect your research question, because if they miss your research question, they are never going to be good codes because they can't help you. Yes, you can do cross-word semantic analysis. Definitely, you can implement that with MAXQDA. Is it possible to sort the codes? Yes, you could move them around. So I could say here, you know what, I want to take this one here and move it down. If this arrow, if this line goes through, you see, you can move it. You can give them a custom order. You can also order them here by frequency or by name if you want to have some fixed order that makes sense. I could here say I sort them alphabetically, but you always can sort them completely manually in whatever order fits you. All right, I will move on a little bit, and we still have time in the end for further questions. I know coding is the most challenging part, right? But there is also a bit more that you should know apart from coding, because I want to take you further, because how you code will strongly impact how you analyze your data. Yeah, one last thing, you can also create a memo, a code memo, where you can keep track of, I'll show it really quick, where you can keep track of the meaning of your codes. So I work task here, click on memo, and then I can see here under code summary, or up here as well, I can say this code is used to code all activities that occur during a workday. This is very helpful so that you can describe your themes. You can open it up later again. If you create your code book, your code guideline, write your definitions, your examples, and all that into this into these memos, and then you will later be able to export your code book as well as a well-structured book or well-structured report. All right, we'll move to our last step, and that is the analysis stage. We've already peeked a little bit ahead, but we'll go further with that. So one thing we need to get to know is the retrieved segments window and the activating and retrieving of codes. And then I will show you at least two advanced features so that are particularly useful in interview analysis. So so far, we have tried one way of retrieving data. We double-clicked on a code here, and then we can take a look in this table overview, but that's not the most convenient usually. Instead, you can open up the retrieved segments window. It's the hiding down here. If it's not already open for you, you can open and close it. I have this window closed 90% of the time until I need it, because else it's just taking up space on my screen. What you can do here is you can get segments back. So here you can say, I would like to retrieve specific segments from MAXQDA. And how do you do that? Here it says you need to activate documents and codes. Activate documents and codes. What does this mean? Activating means basically you choose what data you want from what documents and from what codes. In our case, it's not too surprising that I will choose data from Matteo, because this is the one interview I have right now, but I will switch in a bigger project in just a moment. So I could say I want to know what Matteo said about job satisfaction. Let's see. And I can do this by first activating, choosing Matteo. I click on this little circle. Nothing happens yet because I need to choose a document and codes. So I can say, hey, here, satisfaction with the job. I want to know what Matteo said about this. So I activate this, and then I get the two segments that are behind it. Or I can say, you know what? I would like to see all workday tasks. So I can activate the parent code, and it will automatically activate the subcodes as well. So I see then all the statements here that are workday tasks of Matteo. I will now switch into a more advanced project so that you can see how does it look in the end. You can follow me if you like, because you just have to go to Open Project, and then down here under Example Projects, you find examples that come pre-installed with MAXQDA. So if you have MAXQDA on your device, just go to Open, Example, and then here click on Work-Life Balance, and this will open up a project that has been coded with a lot of data. Here we find Matteo again. Now Matteo is fully coded. That's fantastic. Now I can use this retrieval with more purpose, right? So Earlier we saw I double click on something. I can say double click on friends and family and I get all 41 segments. But that's not very nuanced. I would like to see what Tan and Chris said about education. How do I get this? I get this by choosing, activating Tan and then activating Chris. These are two interviews. And then what did I say? Education. I activate education. Now here are the 5 statements by Tan and Chris about education. So it's a very targeted retrieval. So then I see the statements here. I can also click on one of those stripes and it will bring me back right into the context of this statement. In case here I'm very satisfied, that's fun, but what are you satisfied about? I can click here and then I see, this is about the current job. So this is very important to understand the activating. If I one bit more of advice. If I want to say I want to get all statements about childcare and friends and family about people from Hamburg, from people out of Hamburg. So you see here, I have these groups, document groups. You can create them up here. These are basically folders. I can say I want statements here from Hamburg. So I activate Hamburg and it activates all the interviews, the 5 interviews. You see the 5 up here. That means 5 documents are active. And then I say I want to see what they say about friends and family and childcare because those are 2 connected topics. And then here I have all the statements about childcare, friends and family from this city in this case. So this allows you a very targeted retrieval of data. Of course, you can browse your documents here. You can go to the source of it. You can also show your comments here if you like. You can also export it here to Word, Excel, or even print it. You can do all kinds of things, but this is how you get the data back. All right, I will show you 2 more advanced functions of analysis, just that you have an idea where things are going. For example, I have here Berlin, Hamburg. These are 2 documents groups. So there were 5 interviews with people from the Berlin side of the company and 5 people with the Hamburg side of the company, maybe 2 locations, for example. And I want to compare, I will just delete this. This was from an earlier example. You want to compare if they talk differently about the daily activities. So what I can do here is I can say I want to compare groups, for example, quantitatively would mean I count and compare the numbers. So here I say I want to compare Berlin with Hamburg. And then I can say I want to compare maybe these 5, 6 codes here. So I select what codes I want to compare and then what documents. If I say OK, I here get a quantitative overview, what segments were common or rare in each group, for example. Here, there's not a striking difference because actually both cities are big German cities. I would not expect that there is a systematic difference between them. Here we have a bit more talk about friends and family. Here, yeah, domestic work, but in the end, they both here are very, very similar. But I can still explore also the qualitative side of it. So I can say compare cases qualitatively. It's the same setup. And then I can compare not the frequencies, but the statements. So I click here on OK again. And then I see here in the left column statements from Berlin, in the right column statements from Hamburg. So I can see if the typical workday is different or if they talk differently about education, maybe. So I can compare here also the statements from these groups. Comparing groups is, I would say, one of the most common things to do in this type of research because you want to know people from one place or another, people from this role and that role, people from or interviews from before or after an event. A lot of analytical things boil down to comparing some kinds of groups. Maybe you want to know it more detailed. You want to say, okay, you know what? I have these 7 codes here. I have here the number, how often they come up, but I would like to know how are they distributed across the interview? Does everyone talk about education or just some people? How is that? Because here these numbers don't tell us, does everyone talk about friends and family? I would assume so because the number is quite high. We can get a detailed insight here and we can get it via the code matrix browser. I will show you one quick thing here that also is going to illustrate how the activating works. So if I do just open up the code matrix browser, I leave everything as it is, I just open it and hit OK. I get this really big table that's not useful at all. Why? Sorry, because I did not specify what I want to analyze. This is basically analyzing all your data, everything with everything, and that's just too much to explore in detail. However, I can here say, you know what? I want to only know what people from Berlin say, so I activate Berlin, and only about these daily activity codes. Now I'm getting a browser for 5 documents and 7 codes. So if we now open up the code matrix browser, I see here only activated codes, only activated documents, and now I get this nice visualization. And this is much clearer to read than everything with everything. Now, what do we see here? This tells us how the codes are distributed across documents. Some here. So we see here, for example, that the code friends and family appears 21 times in these 5 documents, but Selim and Tan apparently talk a lot about this topic. So that's why the square node is big. So let's have a look what the actual number behind it is. I can, for example, change here to a heat map with values. Then you see what's actually behind these squares. Matteo talks, in Matteo, we have 3 statements about friends and family, but with Selim 7, Riley 2, Tan 7, Chris 2. So Selim and Tan quite extensively talk about friends and family. Interestingly, Riley did not talk about education. If we go here, we see that as well. No statements by Riley about education, so you can use this also to check on your coding. Yeah, can you download such a matrix? Yes, you can export it. You can export it, for example, here with the export button, and then you can just choose if you want an Excel, PNG, in what way do you want it. So, or you can simply just click here on the screenshot function and then paste it. Yes, you can get this out of the system, of course. So, you can use this to quality check why did Riley say nothing about education? Or here with childcare, you see Selim and Tan talk a lot about childcare, but the others don't. Guess who has children and who doesn't. All right. So that's the code matrix browser. It's just one of countless visual tools. I see the further questions. I'm gonna answer them as soon as I'm done wrapping things up. One thing that's still interesting is that if you say here, okay, Selim talks about childcare. What does Selim say? Here, 3 statements. I can double click on this 3 and MAXQDA will return exactly these 3 statements to me. So I can use this also to read into the statements that are behind these numbers. All right, I will now wrap things up and then come back to the questions that are still waiting in the chat. All right, so this was the analysis stage, activating, choosing documents, getting them back via the retrieved segments. Code matrix browser, for example, is great to compare across several interviews, seeing who talks about something in depth and who is just glancing over a topic. You can use the compare group function. For some general advice for better interview analysis, when you conduct your interview, the audio quality is quite important. So if you can have a quiet room with no background noises, this will be much easier for the automatic text recognition. If you can use more standardized language and not go too heavily into a local dialect, that also helps a little bit. Sometimes as an interviewer, you can adjust it also a little bit and say, hey, I'll stick a bit to a more formal language, makes it a bit easier. And advice how to actually save some money. You can cut away parts of the interview that are not relevant. Like if you talk a little bit before and after, but it's not really part of the interview, you can cut the audio file, make it shorter. If you save minutes, you save money. You can also fine tune the results of your transcription during the coding process. And one last thing that I would recommend, socio-demographic data about your interview participants. I would capture this with a short questionnaire up front, so you can prepare it as a nice table. For example, import it as a document variable. Don't clutter your interview with socio-demographic questions. This should be a questionnaire. How old are you? What is your job? Should be a questionnaire, not the main topic of the interview. So just as a bit of advice here. If you would like to learn more with me, you can always reach out to me. I'm a trainer. I do one-on-one research consultations. I also do webinars and trainings for schools, for universities, for graduate schools, for all kinds of institutions. So if you still have educational budget over that you want to use for your team for the rest of the year, you can reach out to me. I do these kinds of things on a regular basis. You can also add me on LinkedIn. Also, if you would like to have the slides for today, you can just send me a quick email. I just shared my email in the chat, just saying slides, please, and I quickly send you an email with the PDF back, yeah, in case you want to have the slides of this session.